What is the dumbest thing that you did as a young child that made your parents WTF? So my neighbors were all boys and they were really into the whole BMX thing. I wanted to be cool too, so I tried to use my crappy girl bike to do stunts. I actually got really good at little stupid stuff. So I was reading some bike magazines at the grocery store with my mom and I read a story about a boy who rode his bike up the side of a slanted tree and did a backflip. I was determined to do this and show off to my neighbors. So I'm outside with my parents and sister. They are sitting on the porch watching my C's. She was probably 2, and I get up the courage to try my stunt. I yell, "Mom, Dad, look." Then start gaining speed heading straight towards the tree. As you can probably imagine, this did not work out the way I was hoping. After a loud splat, I knocked 3 teeth out and cracked a rib. My bike was bent, and I had to get x-rays to make sure I didn't break my nose. Weird part was that my parents saw me heading full speed towards this tree and just sat there and watched me dive right into it. My brothers and I helped one of our neighbors, an older man, shovel his car out of his parking space. When we had finished shoveling out his car, he said, "Thanks a lot, boys. You guys are lifesavers." We went back into the house and my brother asked me within earshot of my parents what did he mean when he said we were lifesavers. Having no knowledge of the term lifesaver other than the breath mint, I told him it means he wants to put us in his mouth and suck on us. My parents, understandably, freaked the hell out. At about 13 to 14, I spent a lot of time jumping my bike off of a dock into the river. One day, I was riding down the street and noticed that I had some moss from the river in my front axle. Because I thought I was the most amazing gangster/trials rider/etc. around, I decided to just keep riding and reach down to pull it out without stopping. As you've probably figured out, that was a bad choice. A wobble made the spokes catch my fingers and yank my arm into the front wheel, which put my face into the asphalt at about 20 miles per hour. A bunch of reconstructive surgery, and over a decade of healing later, my parents still don't know what the fuck I was thinking. Although I outgrew it, I used to have a psychological condition where pain would make me feel happy and sometimes laugh. It wasn't such a problem until I started kindergarten, since I was under my mom's watchful eye until then. She'd hear me giggle with glee as I'd slap my face around in the other room, and she'd run in and stop me and distract me with one of my toys or something. But I was on a long leash when I started school. I can only assume my parents were embarrassed at my condition because they did not inform the school or my teacher initially. I also think they figured with all the distractions in class I'd be okay. Imagine the look of surprise on my grade K teacher's face when I start repeatedly slamming my head onto one of the craft tables while laughing hysterically, lol. The first couple years of school was a constant battle for my parents and the school, trying to cull this kind of behavior. They were always telling the other kids to keep certain things away from me. I had to stay in my safe corner in class and I always had a staff buddy to accompany me at recess. But I somehow always found some way to indulge my pain/joy game. Blocks were awesome. I could sneak a couple of those into my safe corner and put them behind my back, allowing the corners to jab me in the ribs. Jabbing my limbs was the best though, as the nerves there are more tender and easier to get to. They'd always catch me trying to grab a colored pencil by the sharpeners. Never got my hands on one of those prizes. The distance was too long to travel for me to go undetected. It was always nobody's looking, must go now. Then I'd hear teacher has going out of his hole. He wants a pencil. Teacher. And it was curtains. Crayons could do in a pinch, but they'd always break before I could apply enough pressure to really enjoy the experience. One day though, one glorious day, I was able to get my hands on a pair of scissors. This was the 80s, so the scissors were still freaking steel. I snuck my new joy tool back to my corner, where I was escorted, and waited for when nobody looked. I can still remember the feeling of ecstasy as I got a good grip and jammed one of the blades into my thigh, over and over again. The blood left a mess and the teacher freaked the fuck out and stopped me, but by then my eyes were in the back of my head, and I was in heaven. I vaguely remember paramedics and firemen in the hospital. People were always looking at me after that day. Everyone. Always. Until about 3rd grade, when I became more interested in Ninja Turtles than injuring myself. During a visit to the Washington Zoo, my brother and I were adamant about seeing hyenas. My parents didn't understand our fascination with a somewhat unpopular animal, but obliged us anyway. My brother and I spent a good 5 minutes telling jokes to the hyenas, before it dawned on my parents that we wanted to make the hyenas laugh. I brought a dead cat home in my bike basket, because it had 9 lives, so I just knew it was going to come back. As an ingenious and imaginative 6-year-old child, I decided to play gas station attendant in the driveway with my parents' car. I used the water hose as a gas pump and even used the gravel in the driveway as a gas additive. Luckily my parents found out about what I had done before taking the car out for a spin. When I was about 6 years old, I got really bored and began putting a corn kernel in my ear and pulling it out. After a couple of successful iterations of this, I put the kernel in my ear one more time, only to find myself unable to pull it out. Realizing how stupid what I had done was, I kind of panicked and decided not to tell either of my parents about it. I kept trying to get it out the rest of the day, but eventually just forgot about it. Fast forward 2 to 3 weeks later, I had a doctor's appointment. When he tried looking in my ears, he noticed an obstruction, upon which I remembered that I had stuck corn in my ear and confessed. He tried flushing it out by sticking a long needle behind the kernel and blasting the inside of my ear with water. No success. We tried this same method at another doctor. No success. We were recommended a specialist that would be able to help us out with this problem. So we get to a hospital a couple of days later, and the specialist told us that the kernel had basically expanded because it absorbed water and had lodged itself into the skin in my ear canal. So he asked me to lie down, grabbed a pair of tweezers, and literally ripped the kernel out of my ear. Blood was pouring out of my ear, forcing a blood-curdling scream from me. Needless to say, I learned my lesson and have not stuck anything in my ears ever since. I was around 5 years old, playing with some other boys at the after-school daycare where my mom worked part-time. We came upon a huge ant pile, and as young boys do, start poking at the ant hill with sticks, driving them into a frenzy. To this day, I'm still not sure why I did this, but I unzipped my shorts, said something to the effect of "I'm God and you're all being punished," and proceeded to urinate on said ant pile. We get back inside, and I didn't think anything about it. A few minutes later, my mom and another woman employed at the facility pulled me into a supply closet and started grilling me about exposing myself on the playground. As children often do when confronted, I denied everything. When we got home later, my mom told my dad about it, and they sat me down again and asked me if I did it and why. Again, poker face. I'm now 28 years old, and about 3 years ago, I confessed to my parents that I did, in fact, unzip and let loose on those insect heathens. They laughed. I felt better. Somewhere around the age of 4, I developed an affinity for buttons. So I would walk up to the TV and press buttons while my parents were watching it. This developed into a habit, so it got to a point where they would spank me for pressing buttons on the TV while it was in use. One day, there were a few of their friends over with them watching something. I walked up to the TV, looked at the buttons, looked at them, started crying, put one hand over my butt, and used the other to start pressing buttons on the TV. I was around 4, and I asked my mom if I could walk down to the next block over to visit my aunt's house. She said yes, and asked my aunt to call her when I arrived. Should have taken about a minute. 15 minutes later, and my aunt says I still haven't made it there, so obviously my mom is freaking out thinking I've been abducted or something. She walks outside and follows my route and finds me standing, staring at a stop sign. Apparently I'd been standing there for 15 minutes waiting for it to say go. When I was 6 years old, I was fascinated with candles and wanted to see if it will stay lit inside the fridge. So the 6-year-old me found a candle and lit it. I opened to the door and I'm trying to put it in the middle, but could not get it to sit straight as the shelves aren't flat. So I decided to lean it against the side on the plastic and close the door. Well, of course, before you know it, I see black smoke coming out it. I quickly opened the door, saw huge flames, took the candle out, and ran and hid under my bed. The whole fridge ended up caught on fire, and ended up getting a new one. To this day no one knows, other than me, why that fridge caught on fire. I was little, maybe around 6 to 7. 26 now. I had a babysitter that liked to prank my brother and I, mostly me since I was the oldest, and she felt sorry for my little bro. Anyway, she decided one evening to lock me in our backyard as a joke, and then walk away and pretend to leave me there. I was like 6. I had no idea if this babakiller meant business. I hammered on the sliding door begging to come in. No go. I yelled, still nothing. I wanted the hell in the house. Well, screw this noise, I thought, so I ran to the middle of the yard and ran towards our sliding door, and with the force of maybe 3 6-year-olds, and I completely Kool-Aid manned the glass door. Completely destroyed it. My sitter comes running in with look on her face. She stared at I was cut and sliced up something fierce, and I was pissed. I told you to let me in. Needless to say, my parents weren't happy to get that phone call, but at least I didn't need stitches. When I was about 5 or 6, I was just getting ready to take a shower when I noticed my brother and his friend in his room making farting noises. I was fully sans clothing, but was really curious about the farting, because farts are hilarious. So, I wandered into my brother's room, where his friend informed me that he was not making fart noises, but just making himself fart. So, I of course needed to know how this is done. He informed me that he just pushes really hard and a fart comes out, which I immediately attempted to do myself. To everyone's disbelief, instead of farting, I took an enormous shit on my brother's bedroom carpet. My father, being irate, asked me if I thought I was some kind of animal, shitting on the floor like that. AHH, good times.